Hi, my name is Carl Feagans. I'm an archaeologist with the Forest Service here at the Land Between the Lakes, or at the Land Between the Lakes nearby here. And thank you so much for having me out. As Bobby mentioned, this is the 30th year of evenings upstairs, and I feel honored to be a part of this. She told me the backstory about how she got started, and I think this is a wonderful program. Um, I'm an archaeologist. I've been an archaeologist for about 15 years. I've been doing archaeology for about 15 years. I've been working at Land Between the Lakes for just going on 11 years now. And I started out working in the Pecos Canyon lands of Southwest Texas, doing a lot of rock art. One of my focus things I was interested in at the time was anthropomorphic representation in the archaeological record, how people are represented in the material remains of things they leave behind. Are trash, basically. So archaeology, I don't know if you know, but we're trash diggers. We look through people's garbage in a nutshell. But it's really cool garbage usually, and it's things that people left behind sometimes decades ago, just a few decades, sometimes just a few years ago. And if you're a forensic archaeologist, maybe just a few days or weeks or years ago. But the archaeology that I do now is historic archaeology. I've kind of moved away from prehistoric. I still enjoy the prehistoric stuff, but boy, I've gotten fascinated with historic archaeology. There's just something about it. It's so readily available to us at the Land Between the Lakes that it really has piqued my interest. So tonight, you're probably here because you heard that I was going to be talking about the moonshine, the history of moonshine on the Land Between the Lakes, and that's true. That's one of the things that's got me interested. The last time I was here, I talked about the iron industry. Again, another historic perspective, but there's something about moonshine that just captures people's attention. I've gone to conferences, and there's two topics at any archaeology conference that'll just pack a room this big. It'll be standing room only. It's moonshine and pirates. I don't know if I can figure out how to get a talk on both of those at the same time. I'm going to take over the SAAs or one of those big archaeology conferences. But today I'm going to talk about moonshine, a particular aspect of moonshine. There are maybe 5 or 6, a handful of archaeologists that I know of that do archaeology of moonshine in the United States, or at least in the southeastern United States. And there's not many of them that are still active. But the stills that they look at are usually pot stills. And I want to show you some pictures of those. We got a particular kind of still. You guys may be familiar with it. And it was made by a guy who lived in Paducah for a time. His name was Casey Jones. It was Alfred Casey Jones, I do believe. But he designed a still based off of, as I understand it, stills that he discovered or heard about in Florida. They made rum, and they used a square form factor, where he did the same thing with copper, and we're going to get into that in a bit, but I just want to give you a little bit of backstory about where we're going with this today. So my story, like all good stories, and this is small on purpose because I don't want you guys going out in my sights, but this story starts with a treasure map, like all good stories do. When I first started at Land Between the Lakes, my boss, she had me go out to get, basically I look back, it was to get rid of me, get me out, because I was always asking her questions. What's this about? What's that about? What's this? And she was like, go out and catalog documents in these drawers out in the hallway. So I'm going through these drawers, and I find this 2 pieces of paper. There's this little map right here, and there's this little sheet, and there's little circles on the map, and there's some things on the sheet that say, stuff like spring and pit and pits and hoops, and I'm like, well, this really sounds like, I had read a little bit about moonshining. You know, that's the first thing you learn about as an archaeologist at the Land Between the Lakes, that there was a big moonshine industry. So I was like, well, this sounds like moonshining, you know, and it wouldn't be nice to have the rest of that map, but it just wasn't there. It was just that one sheet, and it was these, and these weren't even the sheet that I had. None of these numbers matched up to it, so I didn't know what was at these numbers. So I thought, well, one day I need to go out in the woods and look for them, but I just kind of put it aside, never thought about it, until one day, our fire cache, a guy was cleaning out a desk. A fire cache is where they keep all the the firefighting gear. They just call it cache. They store it all. It's like a firehouse. He was going through a desk and he handed me this, and you can see there's multiple pages, they're all legal size, and it says right here, Moonshine still sites, located from memory, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a map. And lo and behold, it's from top to bottom is Land Between the Lakes and all these little circles with all these little marks, these little tick marks off of each circle. And I'm going to show you a picture. If you could find that site based off of that, good luck. So I purposely, left out a lot of information, but this is, whoops, let me go back. This is site number 40-3, and it was actually in, right here, 40, and then number 3, and I believe that says large spring and something, hoops maybe. So I kind of put it together. I know where that's at now, and I got the whole key. That big sheath was the whole key. So that was probably 2016, 2017. It wasn't until 2019 when we finally got together. My boss and I, my friend, we went out in the woods and we thought, well, we'll go test this. And we're going to see is there a still there? Is there still a site? First place we go, we find a collapsed, broken up still. We're like, oh my God, there's going to be stills at every one of these. We're going to find, that was the only still we found off that map. But I'll show you a picture of that still in a minute. So to give you an idea of the type of still I'm talking about, this is the Casey Jones style still. I'll get some more images of that, but this is the one that's in Aurora. Right before you get to Land Between the Lakes, there's the Hitching Post is the name of the store. It's in a little cage, and if you have a mind to steal it, bring a couple of folks because it's full of concrete. It got stolen once, and when they recovered it, the law said, look, you can display it, but you got to fill it with, you got to make it inert, you got to make it inoperable, like they do with tanks at the National Guard Army. So they filled it with concrete so nobody could use it again. The guys that stole it thought they were going to make moonshine with it. So this is how it's set on these bricks, and here's a barrel. So these hoops, these are the hoops I was talking about earlier, and here's some barrel staves. So these all fall apart really quickly on the archaeological record. The barrels just disintegrate, and you're left with these iron hoops. There's 6 or 7 of them, between 5 and 7, depending on the barrel. And what we do is we go out with a metal detector in the leaves, and a metal detector would just go bananas when we get near one. And so it's real easy to find those. There's not a guarantee there'll be a still there, though. In fact, the still I'm going to show you, that's the only actual still that we found. We found a part of a still, though. I'll show you that, too. So here we are, just to give you an idea. There's distillation in Kentucky and Tennessee, happened everywhere. There's a lot of archaeology in the Boone on stills. Most of their stills are found in rock shelters. And here's Land Between the Lakes here. I'll zoom in a little bit. Paducah's up here, so this is where we're sitting up here. And right in here is where we found that still that I'm going to show you a picture of, somewhere in this area. It's 170,000 acres. I've narrowed it down for you by about maybe 30,000. But moonshining in the Land Between the Lakes has a long history. So I'm going to go through this timeline a little bit. Moonshine really did start with the earliest settlers that came into the area, folks that got Revolutionary War grants or grants from land grants from the War of 1812. They showed up in the 1790s. As early as the 1790s, they brought distillation with them. In 1800, Matthew Lyon of Ediville arrived with 2 whiskey stills. In 1811, James Thomas and Shadrach Fuchel, they started a distillery at Donaldson Creek Headwater. Donaldson Creek is on the other side of the Land Between the Lakes, the other side of Cumberland, and the headwater is kind of into Trigg County a little bit, but they were in the area, so distillation was showing up. Stewart County started some still houses around 1810. There is the James Russell still house in 1812 in Dover that there's record of. Jacob Urin had a large still on Bear Creek, and then George Boyd also had a big still on Bear Creek. Bear Creek's a big area, so they weren't in too much competition of each other. There was a big demand for whiskey for medicinal purposes as well as recreational purposes, I would imagine. But you hear people say, oh, it's for medicinal purposes. It really was for medicinal purposes at one point, as well as recreation. In the 1860s, 1890s, Edward Mitchison has a still near Golden Pond at the Little Sam McWater's place. I would love to know where that's at, because even in the 1960s, the pool for the water was so deep it was still visible. You have to have water for the distillation to start the condensation process, nice cool water. So the pool that they were drawing from is still visible on the landscape there. And I'd like to know where that was, if anybody knows of that. So I'm always asking that everywhere I go. And then about 1900, 1910, Jonathan Hendricks Saloon in Rockcastle, he's got distillation. He's either doing it on the site or he's bringing it in. Joe Mai's store near Center Furnace dispensed whiskey. William Collins, this is where it starts getting interesting. So William Collins is, he's dispensing whiskey, and he's probably making it as well. And more about William Collins in a moment, but Kaz Futrell, he's also kind of important. He has an orchard near Golden Pond, and he's producing brandy. So that's about by 1910 or so. In 1910 also, the Night Riders were active, and they occasionally concerned themselves with things like prohibition and temperance, and they raided the White Tiger, as what the newspaper article said. A White Tiger in Golden Pond was raided by masked men. So the Night Riders drained his whiskey into the streets of Golden Pond, and they didn't hurt anybody. They just hurt the whiskey. Well, they hurt some people's feelings, I'm sure, but they hurt the whiskey. So 1920, Prohibition starts. Tom Hayden is a pretty important figure, as well as Joe Bogard. These two guys, they knew each other without a doubt. Joe Bogard was actually married to Tom Hayden's sister, Rose, for a period. She passed away, and then he had been married before, and then he married Janella Bogard. But Tom Hayden offered to get people of Golden Pond started in distillation. He furnished them stills and equipment if they give him a cut of the profits. That's fair, I guess. They're not having to, it's kind of like Amway, I guess. Getting you started, and you got to give them a little bit. Joe Bogard, he ends up purchasing Kaz Futrell's still. Now, Tom Hayden marries William Collins' daughter, and that's Susanna, I think, was her name. And so these are all people who know each other, they're close to each other. So you can kind of imagine there's kind of a community of moonshining is happening there in Golden Pond. Bogard, he added the quality control and the professional standards to the industry. And it really truly was an industry at this time. And that's one of the fascinating things about moonshining, is it is an industry. And it might not be an industry of choice for people. They may have started into it reluctantly, but again, it's prohibition. There's the Great Depression going on. There's a lot of economic strife. You're in the land between the rivers. The lakes aren't there quite yet. And so you're kind of cut off. It's an inland peninsula. To get anywhere, you got to go by ferry. To make any money, you've got to farm, or you got to sell whiskey. Well, you're farming already. That's where you're getting the corn and some of the raw materials. Add some sugar into that, and you're going to make some whiskey, and you're going to add a little bit to your family's bottom line. And it really was, moonshiners later on talk about the fact that it really was about providing for your families and making ends meet. Nobody got rich that I know of, that I've read. None of the moonshiners really got fantastically rich. Although Bogard was probably already fairly well off compared to the rest of the folks. He was a businessman already. So was Tom Hayden. That's how they were able to get things started. This was probably the most successful period of whiskey production at the Between the Rivers area. And probably one of the reasons was that Bogard knew people. He knew judges, he knew sheriffs and officials. He was able to probably grease the wheels of the economic engine, so to speak, and get things moving, and without any problems. He was able to, and in fact, I've got a letter from a revenuer. You may have heard his name before. His name was Big Six. and he came after the Bogard period. In fact, in the letter, he gets Bogard's name wrong, so he didn't know quite everything he thought he did. He calls him, I think he calls him Bill or William Bogard, and it was really, but he was clearly talking about Joe Bogard, the period. There were no other Bogards that were doing this at the time. So this was their most successful period. Well, Bogard dies in 1933, just a few months before the end of Prohibition. Tom Hayden dies within a year after Prohibition ends. So the arrests and seizures of clandestine distilleries, moonshine stills, goes on the rise. Revenuers are really coming in. The infrastructure that Bogard and Hayden, I guess it is a crime organization, but they were breaking the law. But the idea was they're going to make good whiskey and nobody gets hurt, and we're going to provide for our families, and so that was the strong sentiment on everything I read about these guys. And nobody was proud of it. They weren't bragging about what they were doing, although Bogard did brag about the whiskey, the quality of the whiskey. He wanted it. He would not allow anybody to make whiskey that was going to be done in a radiator or going to make somebody go blind or anything like that. The quality was important. It had to be there. And they did double runs and things like that. So these guys die, seizures go up, moonshining drops, even Big Six, he says that there was a lull after Prohibition and their deaths. It was a combination, I'm sure. It wasn't one thing or the other. But when their absence and the absence of Prohibition, there was a lull in the moonshining, although it picked back up again. In the 1940s, 1960s, this is what I call the Casey Jones era. So the stills they were probably using before then were these pot stills that you're familiar with. Now begins what I think is an arms race between the moonshiners and the revenuers, because the revenuers have nothing to hold them back. The wheels of justice are not being greased and paid off, or good old boy handshakes and those kind of things. They're done. Things have changed. So the revenuers are coming in. There was even a story about one revenuer who was coming in and he got his vehicle got shotgunned. I don't think they shot him. My guess is he probably parked it outside of a store, went inside for a Yoo-hoo or an E-High or something. They blasted it and took off. But these things were happening. They were finding people's stills. They were using axes and hatchets. They were tearing up their equipment. They were destroying as best they could. They blew it up with dynamite, so much so that one moonshiner or one neighbor of a moonshiner complained, because this is the government coming in helping him, right? So they blew up his neighbor's still, and he's like, oh, the government blew up his still, and now my well tastes like whiskey, and when in reality is it probably didn't, but that was the way that they complained. So this arms race begins, and so let's talk a little bit about distillation process to give you a little bit of background. So, and I'm not an expert yet. One day I may become one. I do have a moonshiner, a legal moonshiner, by the way. He's that makes moonshine. He's got permits and everything. He's offered to show me. So maybe that'll happen one day. But typically you have a cooker, and I'm just going to keep it real basic. Some of the terms are, you have this cap arm. A lot of people call it a lead arm. And you got this, and I always forget the name, there's a header at the top of the still. This is where the condensation process happens. You've got this says stone furnace here. This is an image that I picked up off of Indestructibles or somewhere. How Stuff Works. Here it is right here. How Stuff Works. I was like, how do you make moonshine? And here it showed right up. So basically you have some sort of a flame or fire or heat source underneath this. It's going to create heat. You're going to bring it to a boil. It's going to start condensing. The condensation process happens, and eventually it finalizes the condensation in this cold water, and you got constant cool water coming in. It's important the water comes in from the bottom. Otherwise, you get a reverse of the convection is reversed, and it doesn't work that way. My daughter explained it to me once. She's a chemical engineer. I didn't get it, but she said it was important, so it must be important. Moonshiners know that too. They're chemical engineers. They just didn't go to school for it, or many of them didn't anyway. Then there's this thing here in the middle called a thump keg, and they can be, and this is just cylinders here. They can be any kind of shape, as long as they have, but these are the basics. You got this water, this cool water coming in. The thump keg essentially increases the alcohol content, or the proof. It boosts the proof a little bit. So you can do this in one run. Here's another example of some stills. Here's a pot still here. Same thing without the thump keg. And the condensation process is, it's very basic here. I'm sure the coil is much longer than that, and it comes out as whiskey here. You got fresh water coming in at the top. It's got to come in the bottom. You might have a hose going through the top and emptying in the bottom, but it's got to come in the bottom. But I imagine maybe they made it work that way too. Here's another one. This is typically called a coffin still. And the reason why they'll call it a coffin still is they bury it partly. Again, here we are trying to hide from the revenuers. So you've got your still. If you're looking at it, they're showing it exposed on the sides, but you would barely see it sticking out of the top. And so they could cover it up really easily with some brush, and they'd come in, move it off, cook, and then cover it back up again. And the idea is to hide it from the revenuers. So if the revenuers are out looking in these little hollows trying to find the distillers, they're going to miss them. Here's a pot still that you can find if you take a trip down to Nashville at the State Museum. It's a free tour, by the way. I recommend the State Museum in Nashville. It's pretty nice. This is a pot still they have, and here's the lead arm for that. The lead arm typically will have an angle to it. The bottom will be straight. The top will have a 45, or not really 40, but it has a slight angle to it. And that's so that when it condenses on top of it, it drips toward the thump keg or the condenser. So Casey Jones comes along and he says, well, we can do better. And so he does better. And he's got these square form stills. Here's some Casey Jones style stills. This is the one that's in Aurora that was in the first slide. Here's one that was at the Land Between the Lakes. They did the first ever legal distillation at the Land Between the Lakes. It was, they had to pour it out though. They couldn't distribute it. But it was a legal cook. And so they got a permit to cook it. Here, this is the same cook, I believe, here in color. Here's one in black and white. Here's another still demonstration here from the 60s. And again, the square form factor Casey Jones style still. If you've ever been to the Casey Jones distillery in Hopkinsville, then this is the one they have on display there. And AJ is Casey Jones's grandson. So he's the guy that owns the place. Here's one that's at Murray State. The Rather Museum puts it on display once in a while, and you can see this condenser right here. We're going to talk a little bit more about this condenser, but this would be in a barrel of water like this. So that same condenser here is in a barrel of water. This one and this one here are both at the Golden Pond distillery in Canton. So when you cross LBL, or if you go, it's going to be just east of LBL. So right there in Canton, there's this little distillery. Great guy, and they give tastings. So tell Jimmy I sent you. And so one of the things too that I didn't know, and you guys, some of you guys may be aware of, is when you do this is all a modular system. And so the parts, these all come apart. The lead arm comes off, this piece comes off, then you're left with the cooker. You can empty it out, and then this comes apart here, and so you can package all this up and stick it in the back of a pickup truck. And that was one of the things that Casey Jones really strived for. It was two reasons why he did this. Well, there's probably two main reasons, probably three reasons. One is he saw it somewhere else, and is what we think. The rum distillers from Florida, he saw that. But another reason is, if you think about it, this form factor, and this graphic, by the way, is an artist rendition. I'm an archaeologist, not an artist, so I take full responsibility for the poor artwork. So, but here it is on top of some cinder blocks, and you'll have your heat source underneath of it, a couple of handles here. The idea with this is, instead of the big pot still, that pot still in Tennessee stands about this tall. maybe up just above your waist or bigger. And this one, if I were to put it, the bottom of it here, it would be about this high. It's only maybe less than 12 inches high in a lot of these stills. And so you're getting more surface area to heat. And so it comes to a boil a little faster. And it's also, it stays at the right temperature longer. So it's a more efficient cooker. And when it starts the distillation process, this bottom part here would be straight. This is seen from a perspective and a bad artist as well. But you'll have this part here will be at an angle, so the angle's down a little bit, but the bottom part would be level to the ground. And then it goes into this, to the condenser. Now, Casey Jones also developed this condenser. This is one of them, this is the half of the battle. And this condenser is mathematically, it's a toroidal cylinder, okay? So it's hollow in the middle, and it's hollow between the walls. So these walls right here are hollow. This pipe goes down, and it goes into these two walls, or into the walls from two different directions. And then the condensation process happens inside, and it falls down the walls of this just like sheets, instead of in a tube going zzz, all the way down. And so it's more efficient. It happens faster and more efficiently, and it condenses more. Consequently, he didn't have to worry about the thump keg. And because he didn't have to worry about the thump keg, they could do 2 runs they could cook this, run it through, empty that, and run it and put it back in and run it again and get a higher proof quicker than a pot still can get the first run done with a thump keg, or even without a thump keg, from what I understand. I have never actually done it yet. I'm going to. So here's the still that Chris and I found out in the woods. Our first ever treasure experience. We took the map, we put it on our Garmins, and we walked around. We actually walked around arguing about where it would be for a minute. But when we finally found it, we looked on the map, it was actually the same spot that was, indicated on their map. They, within maybe a few hundred feet anyway, or less than 100 feet, really close. You couldn't miss it. If you were walking through the woods, you would have thought this was just a garbage dump or something like that. You wouldn't have known that was a still. It was all crumpled up. But there was one thing that really stood out, and I don't know if you can see it in here. Here it is crumpled up. Here's another view of it. Can you see that? That's one of the little handles. And where did we see that before? These other stills, they each have that little handle. So the handle is really important. So once you empty it out, you open this little tube. I don't have one here, but you'll see one on another slide. They open it up, they just stop it up with something, they open it up, empty it out, dump out clean all the mash out, and then they can do the run again, or they're done, they can put it in the back of their truck. They can pick it up by the handles, stick it in the back of the truck. Sometimes there's a handle on the lead arm. They can grab that if it's hot, they can move everything, put it all away. And by the way, one of the things that when they put it all together, as you can imagine, you got boiling water or steam. The steam is gonna try and escape everywhere it can go. So to keep it from escaping, they use flour. They just take regular flour and put it around all the seams, and the flour actually will bake against it, and it'll seal it. And then you just scrape the flour off. So that's ingenious. I mean, the way they thought of these things. And so Casey Jones was an amazing guy. There is a story about him creating and I wish I knew all the details off the top of my head. I need to write this down one day. But he created probably on the Kentucky Lakes first cigarette boat. Like remember the old TV series Miami Vice? They always show one of those big boats with like 6 engines on the back, and it just, and the Coast Guard can never catch them. Can they go back? Well, he created a boat out of a Model T engine or a truck engine, and I think he cut the engine in half, and he did some welding and magic and put it in the boat and put some propellers on it, and this thing was just mad on the lake or on the river. But that's the kind of guy he was. He was always developing things, inventing things, and people who knew him speak very fondly of the guy. It wasn't a mean bone his body, never said a mean word. If he didn't like you, he just wouldn't talk to you, apparently, is what I hear. I hope he would like me because I'd love to have heard all of his stories. So here's the still site that we were at, and this is, we're calling it LBL 8500. And so we're numbering all of our still sites beginning with an 8, 8500 I think is where we started at. But these are the items that we found. We found a lot of hoops, drum lid. There's a couple of at least one 55-gallon drum, some woven wire. Woven wire seems to be a very popular, a very common thing to find at still sites. The other things we look for at still sites, of course, are the hoops, the barrel hoops from the wooden barrels, and then 55-gallon drums. The 55-gallon drums, the metal drums, are what they would normally put the mash in, or as people in Golden Pond would call it, the goop. And they would put it in there and let it ferment. And then that's another added advantage of the cooker being portable, is you could have 3 or 4 of these mash sites at different places, cooking at different intervals, different times. So you set one mash site up, go to another one, set up another one, and then you're cooking, today I'm cooking here, next week or a few days later I'll cook here, and you can maximize your time by moving that cooker around to the mash sites. And then if the revenuers find your mash site, they didn't find your cooker. So they were always going out in the woods looking for where people are going and looking for mash sites and that kind of thing. Well, the woven wire, initially, there's another archaeologist that was doing moonshine archaeology. He had an idea that the woven wire was something that they used to fence in maybe a pig to eat the mash when it was done. They would dump it out and the pig would eat that. And I was like, oh, that sounds like that was years ago, and I was like, oh, it sounds like an interesting idea. It turns out it was the wrong thing altogether. I talked to some old moonshiners, and the woven wire went around the mash barrels, and they would stuff it with leaves, and it did 2 things. It hid it from the revenuers, camouflaged it, because if you've ever seen rusty woven wire out in the woods, you don't see it. You trip over it every time. Every time I'm out in the woods, I'm like, oh, tripped over some woven wire, and I put a little flagging tape on it or something so the next guy doesn't trip over it. The other thing is the leaves would insulate the mash barrels and help the fermentation process, especially in the wintertime. So you're going to trap that heat and let it ferment a little bit better. So we found a lot of that stuff. We did find some pipes as well, and I didn't know what those were about until I talked to some moonshiners as well. That has been talking to some of the guys at the Hopkinsville distillery and then the one in Golden Pond has been a real eye opener. In anthropology, we call it ethnography. We're getting oral histories from people, and that's where I learned about the woven wire. That's where I also learned about the piping that we found. That it was probably for the cooker. Again, remember, it's this arms race between the moonshiners and the revenuers. They're trying to hide from the revenuers. So if you put wood or coal and build a fire with it, what comes with that? Smoke, right? So nothing says, here I am, better than a trail of smoke going up in the sky. So to hide the smoke, they would use another barrel, sometimes a 55-gallon drum, sometimes a 25-gallon or smaller. They would fill it with kerosene or gasoline, and then they would pressurize it with a bicycle pump. So they always told me, yeah, look for bicycle pumps too. So I'm always I've seen bicycle pumps out in the woods. I always just thought it was for somebody's bicycle. Now I got to wonder where did I see that bicycle pump at again? So now I got to wonder about it. But the bicycle pump pressurizes the barrel, and then when they turn the petcock on, the gas or the kerosene starts flowing, and they got a burner, and it comes out to these pipes, and they light it, and it burns, and that's where things can get really dicey if your piping isn't right, and you hear about stills exploding and that kind of thing. The pressure between that and the pressure on the still itself, those can be problematic. We did have this depression right here. We think maybe that's where the cooker probably sat over it. They put some blocks or some bricks or something and had the fire underneath of it. That's a possibility, or it could just be an old root throw. A tree might have fell over and left a hole there, and the tree rotted away, and the depression's still there. It could be either one of those. This gray right here, this is a creek, and it would have been a spring-fed creek as well, probably back in the day. I think it was indicated a spring on the map, but we didn't see a spring when we were there. Although the springs on Lambton Lakes are kind of ephemeral, And when they filled the lakes, it changed how the groundwater, the hydrology, some springs appeared where they weren't springs before. Some springs dried up, some springs got better. So it really changed when they dammed up the rivers and created the lakes. What else did we find? We found some cans, beverage cans and jug bottoms, barrel hoops. Now I'm looking for bicycle pumps, woven wire fence. These are all good indicators that a still or a cook site was there. They're not perfect indicators, but they're pretty good indicators. So now we want to know, how old was this site, right? So, well, I'll get to that in a second. Here's a good picture of it, really. Here's all the numbers laid out. This is what it looked like. Here's that 55-gallon drum. And you can see I took this picture in 2020. So it was right around COVID I was working on this. Right before and right after it kind of interrupted us a little bit. But we use leaf blowers to blow off the leaves and see the artifacts on the surface. And to date a site like this, you want to use materials that are handy. We use relative dating. That isn't a guarantee that they're related to this site, but it's a good indicator. So we've got some, this is Duraglass, and it's got some speckling on the bottom. And that particular script of Duraglass was used during a particular time, which is on my notes here if I were to look at it. But and these dates here, this is probably the date here, 48, and that might be the date there. Sometimes beer bottles and soda bottles would have the date on the bottom, the last two digits, and it started out really with the last digit, then they realized they were going into many decades, so they put the last two digits. The idea was to track how long they've been using this bottle, and we only want to reuse it X number of times before we get rid of it. If you remember, bottles used to be returnable back in the day. I kind of miss that as even now. And then over here we have this can. I don't know if anybody recognizes this. Anybody? It's a antifreeze can, and you can see the Prestone logo right here, and it's Union Carbide is the company that made it, and there's their logo. So this font and that logo were in use, I think, in the 50s. So none of these artifacts were from that particular site we just saw, but they were from other still sites that we located. So here's another still site. This one actually made the news in Dover, in Tennessee. We didn't know what this was when we first encountered it. We hadn't really studied moonshine sites in detail yet. But this site was really interesting. It had 47 barrels that we counted, 55-gallon drums, and every one of them.
Those barrels look relatively new. They're shiny. These are old.
They're all the same. Yeah, this is all the same site. This is the sun shining on it, so it does have that effect. We got there late in the day, and from that angle, it does look a little bit shiny. But they're all rusted out, and every one of them to the barrel has axe or hatchet marks in it. At least 3 or 4. Many of them 7 or 8. I mean, they really were mad at these barrels. And the revenuers hatcheted it up, but we didn't know what that meant at the time. So that was one of the things that set us on this track of studying moonshining and moonshine sites. And we looked it up. This is where we discovered about Big Six, this guy Big Six. And yeah, we hatcheted all the barrels. We looked at the barrels and we're like, oh wow, that's what this is. And it's a moonshine site. And as I looked it up, it turns out that Sheriff Miles and revenuers raided this site 2 miles from Dover, and I measured it. It's 2 miles to the foot from Dover, from the center of Dover. So 2 miles, it was in the newspaper, 2 miles from Dover, and they found, the thing that threw me off was they found, I think it was 1,200 gallons of mash. Now, I'm not a math whiz, but I think it's in my notes here somewhere. If you take 47 times 55, that's how many gallons these things hold. It's in the 4,000s, I think. So I was like, that can't be this site. Well, again, my moonshiner friends, they set me on the right path. You don't fill a mash barrel all the way up because you can't move it. So you fill it up about halfway, and then you got room for the fermentation to happen as well. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. That really did make sense. So the revenuers apparently knew how that was done too. So they did the right math. They did the correction. Here's another site we found. This is also at the Lampetina Lakes. This one is a site that three of us went down to look. We were going out exploring some of the sites off this list, just checking some off. And we had gone to several sites, and we were like, okay, there's nothing here. We looked around, we used a metal detector. We had an apprentice with us, and me and another archaeologist. And so we had the apprentice just run the metal detector, because it's straightforward. You just turn it on and sweep it around, and if you get close to a barrel hoop, it's going to go, it's going to make a lot of noise. I mean, it just goes bananas. So he's doing that. We're looking around. There's one barrel there, one 55-gallon drum. Didn't have any hatchet marks on it. Maybe there was two barrels, I don't remember. But that's not uncommon to find out in the woods of LBL, are these 55-gallon drums. People use them for burning trash. They use them for all sorts of things. They would use them for drums, oil drums. So we found that. We didn't find anything else. I was like, yeah, if there's no barrel hoops, I'm going to mark this one off. We're not finding anything. All of a sudden, the kid with the metal detector is like, wah, 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 wah. And then we look, and he says, it says it's right on the surface. So we pulled the grass back, and sure enough, this is just pulling the leaves and the grass back. It was right there. I just had to uncover maybe, 2 millimeters of dirt. It was right there on the surface. So this little piece right here, if you can see, this is it's made of copper, and there's some welding. It's folded over, and it's welded on both ends. Has some solder on both ends, tin solder or lead solder. And then you have this piece right here and this piece right here. And again, moonshiner friends that I talk with, they set me straight. I'm like, yeah. They're like, I'm not surprised you found that. That's the piece that always fell off. So now I'm looking for these things out in the woods too. So we'll find these. But it was really interesting. This one is, when I showed it to a friend of mine, he was like, wow, that's a really good, there's some welding on there. He's like, wow, this is really welded well. So we're pretty sure this was actually handled by Casey Jones. This is one of Casey Jones's handiwork right here. I'm pretty sure it is. He was known for folding his, when he put a still together, he would fold things under, not up. So he had a particular way he did things. Things were folded very neatly. His welds were always very, the beads were always neat and tidy. He was good at what he did. So this is recent. This is actually in December, I think. December, I think. We found another still, and this is it right here. It's a barrel. Here's the barrel here uncovered, and it has the top, that header piece on top. That's made of copper, by the way, this piece is. So we brought a leaf blower. We knew it was there. We're like, well, we got to go and take a look at it. And we brought a leaf blower with us. We blew the leaves off, and there's the lead arm just a few feet away. That lead arm is right there. And here's my colleague, Lacey. She's looking through. I'm on the other side of it, and she's digging out. We dug all of it, we screened everything, collected all the pieces of the barrel. And you can see these are hatchet marks here. I think there's one there. There's some on the sides. So it definitely the revenue has definitely got a hold of it. And one of the ways we could date this is taking a core. I took the core. I just never got around to counting I haven't just not done it yet. But I've got the core in a bag. I'll probably put some oil on it or water or something and get the lines to stand out and count all the lines. And it'll tell me at least how long the tree's been there. So it can't be any older than that tree because it got wedged against that tree. And it was found, let me go back. This is right in here is a sandbar or a gravel bar to a creek. It's the overflow part of a creek where when we get a flash flood, the creeks get wider and they jump the bank. And this is the gravel bar where it jumped the bank at least 2 or 3 times. Actually, probably a half dozen or more times, because as we went through one of the things we noticed when we screened the dirt was it was layered. It would be rough and then fine, then rough, then fine, then rough, then fine. So it had some consistency to it, some layering to it, as if it was flooding over and over and over. So it was wedged against this tree for who knows how long. We couldn't leave it there, so we gathered it up. We put it in our truck and took it back to our shop, and where it sits right now. I don't know what to do with it, but I didn't want to leave it there for another flood to come along and scoop it away because we uncovered it and did all that work. Or it's right near a road as well. for anybody to discover it and take it away, and then it'll be lost to science. We know where the site is now. So the site, we took a good grid, a coordinate for the site, so I could go back to this tree even today if I needed to go back and do some more work. We're actually looking for the condenser. We've walked down the creek looking for the condenser. Next thing I need to do is go up the creek, back into the draw where I think it come from. There is a still site indicated on one of the treasure map that I pointed out in the beginning. There's a still site on there, and we think it may have come from that. It was way up in a draw, so a flash flood probably dislodged it and moved it out. It was abandoned after the revenuers got a hold of it. And it's this, I don't know if you can read that. It says, I think it says Gulfside oil. I don't know how that moonshine would have tasted, but hopefully they cleaned it out really well. I got some Dawn dishwashing liquid in there or something and cleaned it out. But here it is. Here's the hatchet marks. So this is a good close-up of the hatchet marks. And that ugly guy right there is me. There's some more hatchet marks right here. And this was full up to about here. So we dislodged all that sediment and screened it all, run it through a screen. All we found in it was, we discovered the layering effect from constant flooding that happened over and over. So probably, and we wrote it down, I think it was 6 or 7 different events, flash flood events that happened after that. And here's the date that we found that. It was 11/22/24. So that was November, actually, not December. So our next steps, the things that we want to do, we would like to do an excavation. And the good news is we don't have to dig too deep. This is probably as deep as they went. This was done during COVID. You can see they're masked up. Catherine Parker, a friend of mine in Virginia, she works she's done some work on the Francis Marion Forest in South Carolina and done a lot of moonshine work. And they look at pot stills and that sort of thing there. They find them in rock shelters sometimes, but mainly in hollows like we have them here. And they were in this wooded area here. It was really difficult to dig in and get to. And apparently in the summertime there's lots of mosquitoes. And I think they're there at least in the fall here, it looks like. But they went down a few centimeters, and you can see this stain here. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't read her report yet. She hasn't done her final report, or if she has, I haven't had a chance to read it or find it yet. But this is a photo that she shared during a conference, and it was online, so I snatched it and wanted to show you guys. But this is the kind of thing that I want to emulate. I want to do the work that she's doing. She's a fantastic archaeologist doing great work in the same field, so I think it's really interesting. And that is all I have on that subject. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.